Get ready for truth and transparency from an ocean of liberal tears. Welcome to the Blue Shark Show with your host, Mike Lang.
Welcome back. We've got a fun show. We've got a serious show all in one. John, great to have you back in the studio.
Great to be back, Mike. Spent a couple of days on my property out of state, and let me tell you, ticks are a real deal. Getting checked for ticks day after day for a couple of days, it's kind of glad to be back.
Well, good. I'm glad. No ticks, right?
Not currently, I don't think.
Well, hope not. Nate, good to have you in the studio.
Hey, good to be back, Mike. You know, it's been nice and hot outside, but since some of these Supreme Court decisions, I actually had to bring my boat over here because the liberal tiers were out that high up in the street.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
And everything, and that kind of leads us into, a little thing I want to talk about was CNN. Their viewership is down. And have you guys heard Kari Lake's interview with one of the CNN reporters?
All I can say is ouch.
Oh, no kidding. Here's a quick clip of that.
Hi.
Carrie.
Hi.
Nice to see you. Camel off and CNN.
You don't have a mask on anymore. What's going
we're
on?
outside. Do you have a minute to
Well,
chat?
we're 6 feet apart.
Do you have a minute to chat?
I'll do an interview.
Okay.
As long as it airs on CNN Plus. Does that still exist? I didn't think so, because the people don't like what you guys are peddling, which is propaganda. Thank you.
Kari Lake's running for governor in Arizona, and boy, she just goes right after that reporter about CNN Plus. Hey, I'll do that interview on. Oh wait, you guys don't have that anymore, right? She went after the mask thing. So what do you think?
Well, I think that's probably a mark of a good candidate. They don't take themselves too seriously. They acknowledge how big of a problem CNN is. I mean, I don't know anything about the Arizona gubernatorial race other than I like what she had to say there.
Well, CNN keeps saying they're going to pivot back to real hard news. There's been shakeup after shakeup there of their corporate structure. And they keep telling us we're going to have some real hard news here in a little while, and we'll keep waiting. See, the problem is the candidates now, they've all taken the cue from Donald Trump, and they just show them no respect. And so until they actually take that hard pivot, nobody, that's taken as a serious candidate on the right is going to give them any respect. So it's time for them to clean up their house, and then maybe we'll come back and talk to them later.
Right, and they do it through their stories. Their stories are complete junk and propaganda, just like Kari Lake was talking about. And I think the only people probably that watch that anymore are the airports, and I bet most of the schools have them piped in. So there's your coverage right there.
Funny you say that, Mike. I actually heard that the CNN airport network is going away. So even that fake part of their viewership is about to disappear as well.
Well, that'll probably be half of what they have now.
And a lot of people have turned to podcasts now. Joe Rogan, for example, has more people watching his stuff than CNN ever does.
Well, that's just new media. It shows us the direction we're going, kind of why we're here today.
If you like the show, you like what we're doing, please go to thebluesharkshow.com and sign up for our member-only access at $4 a month. Thank you. And let's get into, the big topic right now from last Friday, the Supreme Court decision to send abortion back to the states where it belongs. Of course, Roe v. Wade and the big case of Dobbs v. Jackson. And now the states, where it should be, and it never should have, gone to the federal government, are back in control of abortion, and the liberal heads are exploding.
Well, before they light themselves completely on fire, let's not forget that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the patron saint of the pro-abortion left, said herself well over a decade ago that it was bad law and that the left eventually would regret ever couching such an important thing in their minds on the back of bad law. So liberals, wake up, listen to your own people.
This is a major victory for the 10th Amendment, and, places like the 10th Amendment Center, y'all are familiar with them?
Right.
Yeah, so they are probably just jumping up and down saying, hey, here's a novel idea. We leave it up to the states. And if you look at the Constitution, that's where a lot of this stuff should be anyway.
It's the further implications of post-Roe that are honestly just as interesting. Now that we've slayed this dragon, let's look and see where this really takes us, because this isn't the only piece of bad law that's occurred, from previous courts. And I think Clarence Thomas actually even, kind of gave us a nod that maybe the court needs to look at some other law that's bad law, not necessarily because we're going to change the direction of the nation, but we just need to admit that bad law has been made and it's time to undo bad law. And if we need to make good law, then you make good law. You don't leave bad law on the books.
And it says in a statement from, Justice Thomas that it says should reconsider, unquote, past rulings, granted also same-sex couples the right to marry terms, of course, and that's the Obergefell. So that's one of them. So it'll go back to the states. And you have states like Texas that have one man, one woman in their Texas Constitution. And right now with the abortion, there's going to be 13 states that totally say no abortion through our state. And of course, Texas is one of them. There's a list. And not only 13 states, but over 24 states will have some type of abortion restriction. So this thing's going to be pretty big.
This is a huge event for the pro-life movement because now instead of having it all centralized up in D.C., they're going to be spreading out to these other states where abortion is still legal, and they'll have a fight on their hands there. And I think that this is the first step in a general shift towards a more godly country.
I 100% agree with you, Nate, because this is a hard issue. It's been returned to the states, so now it's going to force that hard issue to the next level, which is we need to support our families. We need to support pregnant women. We need to support young families. We need to support single moms. We need to support single dads. The shift needs to be the continuing heart shift of the Christian community needs to be, now that we've slayed this dragon, we've got to take what's going to be left over and turn it into something positive. And I think that's where the conservative side needs to really shift into high gear now.
And in prior times, back before 50 years ago, before this took effect, the government helped out a little bit, but the churches helped out, the local communities helped out, the local nonprofits helped out, and now all of a sudden everything's shifting to the government has to take care of everything, and the churches need to step up. This is a perfect time for them to step up, if they're a biblical church, and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to help these families out. We're going to help these mothers out, these babies out. And I would like to see more coming from the churches and the private sector than the government, because it's personal responsibility when it comes down to this. And this is huge for the states. I don't think people realize how big this is on a due process level, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about due process. And when they reconsider these items and kick them back to the states, you better make sure that your state legislature is tough and conservative and not wishy-washy, and certainly not just furniture sitting there.
You have to be ready for these events to take place. And so that's why when we're starting with Roe v. Wade, I would hope, and I haven't done my homework, but I would hope these churches and these organizations have been at some level preparing for the eventuality of Roe v. Wade being overturned and being ready, because there's going to be an increased burden on the needs of your pregnancy assistance centers and your other nonprofits, ones that have been pro-life all this time. Put up or shut up. Now is the time. Christians, you got to stand up now.
That's a gap. That's a gap that right now the churches could fill and reach out and bring people in and show them, the love and what we need to take care of everybody, and not necessarily the government. What an opportunity, as you said, to do this. And, going forward, it's going to be up to the local legislatures, the state legislatures, your local officials, because, when the Obergefell case came up in 2015, I believe it was, the gay marriage issue, a lot of states had in their constitution one man, one woman. So if that gets overturned and brought back to the states, what will the states do? What will the local officials do? It's time to stand. If the Supreme Court kicks this stuff back down, we've got to have people in place that will stand and not fold on a local level.
And that's why it's important right now, and we're seeing this in a lot of different areas, for the Republican Party to continue focusing on building and maintaining and trying to salvage the strong nuclear family. That is the building block of all great civilizations, and that has been under attack for decades. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for just a second. marriage isn't always salvageable. Sometimes people get married and maybe they shouldn't have. They felt obligated to, whatever. There was a pregnancy, whatever. But in the event that a marriage is not salvageable, we need to be sure that we are empowering both parents to have equal time and access to their kids.
Oh, that's agreed. You've got to have both biological, adopted, whatever it may be. You've got to have both parental figures, male and female, involved in that child's life.
We're back. Roe v. Wade has been thrown out. It's back in the states. The responsibility is back, but yet the nuclear family is worse. So we've got a lot of work in not just the churches, but the families as well. And like it or not, the definition of family, whether we like it, the definition of nuclear family is necessarily going to change. And that kind of goes along with your, the giving the rights to the fathers. We need to understand that a single father deserves just as much support as does any single mother. We need to lose this mindset that if we're going to encourage the nuclear family to change, because we necessarily have to, we have to also understand that we need to embrace that where it meets our values. And so that means a single father family, we need to support just as much and in every way as we do a single mother family.
When you look at the statistics on churches, religion, the higher percentage of men that bring their families back to the church is just astronomical compared to the women and the grandparents and whoever else. It's the male in the family that brings that entire nuclear family back to the church. So you're right, we've got to start focusing also on the men if you want to bring them back into the church, and then the churches can help out with the nuclear family. But kind of getting back, we're getting off a little bit, but kind of getting back to the liberal tiers of this, with AOC saying it's illegitimate. The Supreme Court ruling is illegitimate, and there's video of her all over, social media.
Well, that sounds like an insurrection. Is she in the middle of an insurrection right now?
Wait, is it January 6th? Because I think that's the only day you could use, right?
Yeah.
And then you also have Maxine Waters that, goes out there and says, to hell with the Supreme Court ruling. We're going to do X, Y, and Z.
The hell with the Supreme Court. We will defy them.
Maxine Waters and AOC out there just being the typical liberal tier, woe is me type person.
Isn't it kind of strange that when the decisions go the left's way, it's the settled law of the land. Don't touch that. It's sacred. It's sacrosanct. You can't even glance in the direction of the Supreme Court if you disagree with them. But wait a second, we get a couple of decisions that don't go their way that actually people on their own side have said were bad law. Doesn't go their way, and all of a sudden they're pulling their hair out. They're calling for expanding the court. They're calling for that the court is illegitimate. Really? The same people that were looking at us not even 24 months ago, questioning a very suspicious election, and we're barely Americans in their eyes. And their sacrosanct Supreme Court gives them something that they don't like the taste of, and all of a sudden they're going to just throw it all out.
Well, and if there weren't for double standards, they'd have no standards at all. So
no, and you had Trump for 4 years, and he had 3 picks, right, on the Supreme Court. So how big is that?
That was huge. This is a product of Trump's legacy. And for a lot of people in the beginning who said, well, he used to be a Democrat, where's he going to be on pro-life stuff? Judge him by his fruits. Look at where he got us. He got those 3 Supreme Court nominees pushed through, and now we've overturned Roe v. Wade, which has been, it seemed like an unattainable goal for all of my life, and
right.
Now here we are.
Well, how dare he have mean tweets, and how dare he cuss when he has his speeches, and how dare he, and look, like you said, look what happened.
Well, behind all those mean tweets was a lot of very quiet yet effective work going on in the federal judiciary. And I hate to break it to the left, but if they're upset about this, wait till they see the flexing arm of the federal judiciary over the next 10 years and the changes that he made there. This is the reverberations in the federal judiciary are where Trump is going to be remembered in the history books. The tweets and stuff will get minor footnotes. The results of his Supreme Court picks and his federal court appointments will live on for decade and decade and decade.
And I agree. And what I love is, you get Republicans, and we're all conservative here, but you get Republicans on social media that are totally against this issue, and it's like, for me, you have your principles, you have your platform, you have everything, and it's, the Constitution, and it's all about, belief in God. And if you can't, as a Republican, say that you believe in the sanctity of life, then you know what? It's time, if you're on social media and you're listed as a Republican, but I see you out there saying men should have a vasectomy and it's not, it's a woman's body and it's, it's a baby. It's not, there's two bodies there. So if you're out there as a Republican saying, I'm a Republican, it's time to turn in your Republican status because you need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, there's always being an independent. That's a perfect place for them. If they're, pro-gun but pro-baby killing, go be an independent, but don't try to bastardize our party.
It's also a pastime for other people in the conservative movement to stop looking the other way. When people that they sometimes agree with, voting sometimes, they get a pass on, and they're allowed in the party to be considered leadership in our party when they don't stand for what we stand for. They don't believe in what we believe for, but because they're popular and because we can sometimes count on them for certain votes, they're allowed to be kind of rogue on the backside, and I'm tired of that. It's time for them to be for Republicans, conservatives to be called out when they don't toe the line, because the party has certain values, which is what makes you a Republican. And if you can't toe that line, then you're not us, and you need to go somewhere else.
I see that on social media throughout the state, throughout the nation, and I look at it and you got to cringe and say, what's going on? Don't tell everybody you're a Republican and you don't stand for life and you don't stand for the Second Amendment. You don't stand for your hard principles and morals. Just leave the party. Go find something else, and it's not for you. And you kind of hate to say that, but on the other hand, it's like, I'm kind of tired of fighting that inward, you're a Republican, you're not a Republican. The rules are set for it. If you want to follow them, follow them. If you don't, then get out.
Someone much wiser than me said recently, the issue now isn't Republican versus Democrat. It's conservative against traitor.
Right.
And some people might cringe a little bit with that, but I absolutely agree with that 100%. That's the problems that I see in the Republican Party at the national level, the state level, and all the way down to the local level are people that voice the Republicanism with their mouth and lips, but in reality they don't believe that way. And when the votes really come down, they don't vote that way, kind of like John Cornyn recently in the gun issue, which I think we're going to get into later. But I'm tired of the lip service being paid to conservatism. Either you're on the team or you're not. And if you're not on the team, get on another team.
So moving on to another topic, and it's Nav speak. And it's got to be one of the most ridiculous things I've seen with Johnny and Conchi, and they're doing training for the Navy on pronouns. Now, Johnny and Conchi are dressed, perfectly for the pronoun speak that they're talking about. But I find it kind of ironic that their training video, this Navy training video, has a male and a female that are actually giving the instructions to the training. So somebody probably said, who's going to teach this training? Well, I don't know, but it's got to be a male and it's got to be a female. So they're already messing up with who's going to do it, who's going to be who. And then you get into the video. Let's look at the video.
Hi, my name is Johnny and I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, and I'm Conchi and I use she, her pronouns.
And we're here to talk about pronouns.
What is a pronoun? A pronoun is how we identify ourselves apart from our name, and it's also how people refer to us in conversations.
Using the right pronouns is a really simple way to affirm someone's identity. It is a signal of acceptance and respect.
If it's a signal of acceptance and respect, how do we go about creating a safe space for everybody?
So, Nate, you were in the Navy. Do you know Johnny or Conchi?
No, and I don't even know the Navy anymore, unfortunately, and here's why. We identified this years ago that communists are infiltrating every one of our institutions, up to and including the military. And what we just witnessed there in that training video is one of the end results of communists taking over the military. It's telling people that they have to placate to non-scientific stuff about what other people preferred to be called, and not stepping on people's feelings. And, oh, if you misgender somebody, it's just like mispronouncing their name unintentionally. No, it's not. No. And, you know, I'll tell you, a lot of our language, especially when dealing with higher ups, is, you know, sir, yes, sir, no, ma'am. You know, when we're talking to people that are officers being enlisted formerly. And so I just can't imagine the mental gymnastics that people have to do to undo all the training they've had in the English language and the 7 pronouns that are accepted therein to now this politically correct junk that, again, it's coming from our own military. The military is not supposed to be a big social experiment. The Navy is supposed to be one of the elite fighting forces around the globe to kill bad guys and keep America safe. And instead, they're having all that stuff parading around and just making a mockery of it. And frankly, it makes me sick. And if you're a veteran and you watch this and it makes you sick too, please chime in the comments and let us know what you think.
And I don't know what him or her, he or she thinks that him or her is doing. But I can tell you what, this has got to be the most ridiculous thing when you're talking about the military and why we train our military and what the reason is to go fight wars. And you have people that have been in the military that go into training. They're there to put their lives on the line. And then you got to put up with this kind of crap in the military. And I have to believe that there's a higher percentage of people in the military that think this is just total BS. And you have Johnny and Conchi in training videos, and you actually have, you know, naval heroes like John Paul Jones that started out. You've got Chester Nimitz. You've got Michael Murphy. You know, all these heroes.
Tom Cruise.
All these heroes, you know, that
was a Top Gun joke.
That's right. That people look up to. And of course, that new movie, you know, Top Gun, that wasn't woke. I mean, that was a good movie, made a ton of money. And then you get all these woke movies from Disney that slam. But, you know, you got to think that people in the Navy that are there to serve and actually go fight in a war have to be disgusted with this.
Well, and imagine being in boot camp. You know, you're in your late teens, early 20s. You've left behind your hometown. You're going off to go serve your country with honor. And then you get in there. Imagine misgendering somebody in boot camp, because everything's blown out of proportion in boot camp. You do one thing wrong, it's blown out of proportion, and you get your, you know, butt kicked for it. But that's okay. You got to make sure, you know, the guys are tough enough to do it. But I can only feel bad for people who grow up in the flyover states or rural America that aren't used to giving their pronouns when they start addressing a class, or aren't used to having to think, wait a minute, what does this person like to be called? Let me modify my knowledge of the English language. This is going to create some problems. And for that to come from Nav Admin, that's the Secretary of the Navy. Shoo.
Well,
we have fallen so far. And Obama started tearing down the military. Trump brought it back up, but Biden he's doing a good job with his Chinese pinko commie handlers.
The purpose of the military is to break things and kill people and project American power. And there's nothing in what I just saw that accomplishes either one of those three. And in fact, it completely undermines the whole idea of what the military is for. Pardon me to ask a question is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Where are we going to be 25 years from now? Again, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was so hair-minding. We had to do it. We had to do it. We had to do it for equality's sake. Here we are 25 years later, and we're discussing pronouns instead of discussing, you know, dropping bombs and strategy. We're talking about pronouns.
Well, and then the gender reassignment surgeries too. You know, if you're trans in the military, unless they reverse that, last I heard, they were still offering you gender reassignment surgery, taxpayer funded, and then beyond that you have to be on those medications that make you non-deployable. So now you are a person in the military who's taken up a spot on what they call shore duty instead of sea duty, you know, being able to be deployed, and it never ends. We, in my opinion, have to get all every single transgender, transvestite, whatever you want to call it, get them all out of the military, one way or the other.
Well, I also recently read, and very quick, Nate, on the back end of yours, that not only does the military offer and will pay for gender reassignment surgery, they're training their officer corps to know when to suggest gender reassignment surgery to one of their soldiers.
You know where this comes from? It comes from teaching this in the liberal, Marxist public schools and universities. And all of this over the last few years has trickled up from all these CRT programs, all this, brain pop issues, and, you feel free to be you, me, a tree, a furry, and all these kids that have learned over the last few years, shame on the parents too, but the schools are indoctrinating these kids with all the pronouns, all the transgender stuff, and it trickles up to the universities, and this is what you get going into the military. And then you have some of the old people that, how can you be a general and start dressing as a female? And, you have people that are assigned to some of these positions, and if I was another country, I would just not only laugh, but I would say, you know what, the United States is ripe for a takeover, but then they have to just laugh and say, we're not going to touch them because they're doing it enough from the inside on their own.
I want to thank them, though. I do want to thank them for, again, wearing the rainbow, which is the symbol, God's promise not to redestroy the earth because of our immorality. So I do want to thank them for that.
Well, I do notice that those weren't the Roy G. Biv rainbow. Those had other colors in there, too. So, I'm sure there's some hidden meaning behind what kind of rainbow that was. But
I'm claiming it anyway.
Okay.
I'm identifying that rainbow as a Roy G. Biv rainbow.
Well, and now that postmodernists have taken over everything and everything's subjective, there is no truth, there is no right or wrong. I guess you're right, John.
Thank you. I'm identifying as right.
He had black, brown, red, orange, yellow, black, blue, and purple.
They've also confirmed that CRT and other things like that are being trained in our military service academies. So not only are we taking our enlisted ranks and infecting their minds in the enlisted ranks, but literally the brain trust and cradle of the future of the U.S. military is being poisoned actively.
Yeah, and that's something Trump identified. If y'all remember, he was the first one to really start talking about CRT, and one of his first things was he said, hey, this stuff is in the military and we have to get it out. This is no good. And he was years ahead of his time. Now it's coming around to, public schools and, universities by extension. But
where are the generals? Where are the generals standing up saying unit cohesion, the thing that they were screaming just about don't ask, don't tell? They were screaming that just by not asking that we were going to destroy unit cohesion. Obviously, they dealt with it, okay? But to fast forward 30 years and look at the idiocracy that's come out of that idea, for the generals for the cadre of generals not to be standing up as one and pointing the finger, this is a danger to our nation. This is a public defense, this is a national defense issue, and we're ignoring it and we're laughing about it because you can't watch that video as a logical, rational adult and not laugh. Or shake your head or cry.
Well, and you ask where those generals are, a lot of them got fired by Obama during his great purge of the upper echelons of the military.
And the rest retired because they didn't want to put up with that crap.
Well, and even now, a lot of sailors that I served with that had planned on staying in the whole time, when they said get jabbed or get out, a lot of them got out. They said, I'm not doing this, and it's crazy, but they gave up their retirement, gave up all kinds of stuff because they felt that strongly about it.
Well, I'm of course I'm afraid of our military getting a black eye, because I have a son in the military, right? So I have skin in this game personally, and the idea of me sending my son to go fight, especially in somebody else's foreign war, after this is the kind of bull crap that's been poured through the ears and the eyes of soldiers, sailors, and airmen everywhere. The idea that those guys are supposed to be backing up my son who's going to be on the ground there, that scares me and makes me really unhappy.
If you like the show, you like what we are doing, please go to thebluesharkshow.com and sign up for our member-only access at $4 a month. Thank you. Well, let's get into guns. And, the Roe v. Wade case, Supreme Court decision kind of overshadowed another huge decision by the Supreme Court, and they struck down a New York gun law. And this law basically said that, New York wanted, and then they were doing through their gun restrictive laws, that said you needed proper cause to show why you needed a gun for self-defense.
What about the Second Amendment?
Well, that's proper cause, but look at New York. That's why they had to strike it down. So they don't follow any of that stuff.
That's true.
So, here we go with, another huge decision, 6-3, of course. And what a good decision that was.
Yeah, and this is an example of how Roe v. Wade got power returned back to the states in line with the Constitution. This overruled the state's law that violated the inalienable rights of its people through the constitutional process in the Supreme Court. So it's good to see the court recognize both sides of this.
Well, I think it's also good to see the court finally taking on and willing to take up the big issues. It seems like the Supreme Court likes to spend most of their time dabbling in things that don't affect the average American. While I'm not saying that's not important, it doesn't really impact everybody where they live and work every day. The two decisions this past week are extremely impactful to decisions and lives of everyday Americans, and it's good to see the court taking it up. I'm kind of curious as what's been the change in the court other than the three new justices, and it bodes well for the future of the court, because we have a lot of really pressing things that are going to be coming up. We've got a lot of cultural issues that are going on in the United States, and it's finally nice to have a court that's going to step up to the plate and actually take a swing at that ball.
And I find it hard that we've got a place, New York, of course, here in the United States. We have a constitution. They have a state constitution. Yet you have to go before their state to get permission, and they're going to judge if your permission is good enough to carry a handgun to defend yourself and keep your rights as a Second Amendment, and the government's going to do that. Do you know how far gone New York is to do that?
Well, compared to Texas, where luckily we now have constitutional carry, we don't have to tell anybody nothing. As long as you can legally carry it, or as long as you can legally own it, you can legally carry it. And frankly, that's the way it should be all across. But, I guess each state can manipulate that a little bit.
It's the blatant unconstitutionality of some of these gun laws in some of these smaller areas like Chicago and New York and California. I say smaller areas in California. But it's just so blatantly unconstitutional, and for decades now it's been allowed to go on. It is so refreshing to see a decision that spanks these authoritarians and says, I'm sorry, no, the actual letter of the Constitution says this pretty darn clearly. And you know what? It's about time we start applying the ideas of the Second Amendment that the left, until recently, screamed about the First Amendment. The First Amendment sacrosanct. Well, minus the last several years where the First Amendment no longer exists, we had that shoved down our throat and they ignored the Second Amendment. So it's very refreshing from the right for us to finally be able to breathe a breath of fresh air and say, you know what, no, the right that we like to hang our hat on, the Second Amendment, the one that protects the rest, that one's finally being respected by the letter, and it's refreshing.
And then you have what's going on now in Congress, and you take the Supreme Court decision, which is great, then you have the opposite effect, and you have one of the strictest, gun pieces of legislation that's called, I think they call it the Safer Communities Act. That's a misnomer right there, but you have somebody doing the red flag laws now in Congress, trying to do away with due process, and we even had 13 Republicans voting for that specific bill.
And that's what's crazy to me. Everything up there is very coordinated and like, hey, you guys vote against this because you're not up for re-election for a little while or whatever. I looked at that and I said, why did they have 13? Is that political suicide? Like, do they think that people are just going to let bygones be bygones in a couple of years with John Cornyn?
No, the masks are coming off, and it's what's so beautiful. It's unfortunate that Cornyn just got reelected because I would love to see him in the chute next. But we have a schizophrenic government. The court is signaling to the rest of the government, the rest of the nation, and I would say the rest of the world. The court is signaling we're returning back to some rights. We're going to read our laws and our Constitution, and we're going to apply it, and we're going to work in that framework. And while that's going on at the exact same time, you've got the legislative branch schizophrenically saying we're going to pass all this, we're going to restrict. They're completely tone deaf to the signaling of the court. But unfortunately, what's going to happen is they're going to be spanked again because these laws are going to work their way through the courts. And if the court is signaling to you, hands off the guns, and yet you're going to do something crazy and on its face unconstitutional, like the red flag laws, they're just going to have to then wait again for it to work its way through the courts and again embarrass them with, at least a 6-3 ruling one day.
They're going to increase the background checks. There's no due process in the red flag laws they want to do. And Biden's, of course, going to sign it if everything passes. And the problem I see is you keep, and we have some Republicans that keep running from crisis to crisis to crisis and say, hey, we'll solve this. We need more laws. We solve this. More laws, more laws, more laws. And what you find out is the bad guy with the gun doesn't give a damn about the laws. He's not going to go, I have 6 laws that I broke getting this gun. Now I have 7 laws. Oh, I can't do that or I'll be in trouble. They don't care. They don't care a bit. And yet our Congress, time after time, reacts in this manner of more laws, more laws, more laws against the Constitution.
So what's the solution? What's the overall solution? Well, you know what? It's time to once again get active, get involved, and vote these clowns out.
I'm happy that the Supreme Court's willing to start taking some of this stuff up, and it seems like they've gotten a little more courageous lately, but I do still wonder where was that courage when it came time to review the 2020 election, because it was all those same justices. I don't know.
Well, and we're suffering because of that decision. And when it comes back to the guns, people always talk about it's not the gun that went out and shot somebody, it's the person. And that's why the red flag laws are coming in, and we talk about mental health. And, but I have a lot of guns. I've been in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement for 30 years. And so over the years, I picked up a lot of guns. And, yeah.
An arsenal.
Maybe not an arsenal.
Is it more than one?
Yes.
Arsenal.
It's an arsenal. CNN just headline right now, Mike
CNN.
Lang has an arsenal.
Well, maybe one of my friends could put it on CNN for me. So, maybe we could look into that. But so, I have a security system in my house, of course.
Yeah.
And I went into, Fort Worth the other day, and it's, half hour away, whatever. And the funniest thing, I came home and I was reviewing the tapes, and guess what I found? I found the guns were going crazy all by themselves.
Oh, no, not again.
Yeah, take a look at this photo from the security camera. They're sitting around the kitchen table playing cards.
Well, see, now the red flag law makes sense now. Now I understand it. If I'd only known that.
It kind of reminds me of Toy Story when the people leave, the toys all run around crazy. It's Gun Story. There you go.
Yeah, they just got out of the safe and decided to just go play cards.
Oh, wait, they're playing poker there?
Yes.
Are there? I don't see any money on the table. Do you know if they were betting? Because that's also would be against the law.
Well, that's illegal. And just being a gun, is that illegal now or not?
Well, it depends. How old are those guns? Because, Mike, I see a bottle of whiskey sitting there.
Uh-oh.
I think it's an empty bottle, so one of them must have got one, somewhere. I guess they went to the liquor store while I was gone.
Man.
Can you believe that?
These guns are out of control.
Aren't they? I mean, all by themselves, they just get up, get out of the safe, and go play cards. And then I've got this specific handgun, and I guess this specific handgun wanted to sit by, the water out on the patio and have a good time drinking a beer.
Well, I'm kind of concerned now because with these firearms having access to alcohol, I would say we needed to lock the alcohol up in the safe, but that's where the guns are. So you can't do that.
No,
you need
you
a
can't.
separate alcohol
Yep.
safe now, I think.
And then, I think, maybe one of the guns took off in the truck and, maybe picked all that stuff up. I don't know. So, maybe we ought to start tracking these guns and put trackers on them.
Your guns went on a beer run, Mike.
They probably did.
Are those guns even licensed
Well,
to drive?
no, they're not licensed to drive. I mean, and then, you got one on the couch taking a nap.
He's probably the one that drank all that whiskey.
Probably. And that's that. What do they call that? It's that ominous looking gun, the AR. What is it?
That is a scary piece of...
Scary.
That's
Yeah.
a weapon of war.
I don't know. It actually, in that picture right there, it actually looks
Kinda cute.
quite peaceful.
Yeah.
I think it's quite peaceful and cute.
Don't
Yeah.
disturb it. It's sleeping.
Yeah. Shh, don't disturb it, But then, I guess we got one out of the whole bunch that said, hey, if I'm coming out, I'm working, right?
Yeah.
So we got one out there cutting the grass.
See, I thought that was his punishment for playing poker and drinking booze. You made him go outside and sweat it out.
No, see, I wasn't there. So, at least he was helping take care of the house for me. And I guess it got contagious because not only was he out mowing the lawn, but I had another one that just happened to start fixing the light bulbs for me because I had a light bulb out.
So how many guns does it take to change a light bulb?
I don't know. I wasn't here. I only saw one. So, but it's funny because when I'm here, I never see him out.
Man.
So maybe it is like that Pinocchio or Toy Story or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what you call your investments doing work for you. So good on you.
How do I get my guns to do that?
I don't know. You have to get a security system and maybe you can watch them because, it's not the person behind the gun,
It's the gun.
Yeah.
Well, how do I glean the intent of my gun? Whether it's a good gun or a bad gun?
I don't know. Was it written on there when you buy it? I don't either. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask my guns.
Let me know what they say.
If they start talking to you, Mike, you might go see a psychiatrist.
And that's why we need red flag laws, right?
Oh,
your guns are
that's
talking
true.
to you.
Because my guns, right.
They're talking to you.
Right. So, I get back home. Of course, I see none of this. Everything's back in the safe. Everything's put away. Nothing's left out. So, when people talk about this, I guess maybe the left that's what they really think. They really think that, the guns go out and do all this damage on their own, that, people aren't in control of the guns. And, I didn't find one spent round or one bullet hole in the house because I looked when I saw this security tape. So that tells you right there, I guess nobody was around to pull the trigger.
Or it tells you that the price of ammo is too high and we need to lower that cost.
Did you see any knives around? I mean, because
No.
they could have used knives on each other.
They could have.
Because we need knife control too.
No baseball bats, no knives, no nothing.
Brass knuckles.
But maybe I need to look into the security tape further. And we stay tuned for more information from the security cameras.